Good evening. The song we're going to share with you tonight is called There Is Nothing Greater Than Grace. What do you say to someone who feels like they've lost it all? Over the edge with no one there to break their fall. And what do you say to someone who feels so unloved, giving themselves away a little bit every day just to be good enough? And what do you say to a hopeless soul who can't remember their way home and everything is out of their control? There is no valley, there is no darkness, there is no sorrow greater than the grace of Jesus. There is no moment, there is no distance, there is no heartbreak He can't take you through. So before you think that you're too lost to save, remember there is nothing greater than grace. What do you say to someone whose life is on the line and they're unsure what happens after their last breath in time? What do you say to someone who's built a wall you can't break through and it's so hard for them to hear the truth? There is no valley, there is no darkness, there is no sorrow greater than the grace of Jesus. There is no moment, there is no distance, there is no heartbreak He can't take you through. So before you think that you're too lost to save, remember there is nothing greater than grace. Don't lose hope, don't let go, don't give up. You are not alone, you are not alone. There is no valley, there is no darkness, there is no sorrow greater than the grace of Jesus. There is no moment, there is no distance, there is no heartbreak He can't take you through. So before you think that you're too lost to save, so before you think that you're too lost to save, remember there is nothing greater than grace.
In case you're wondering who the special music was, that was the Easily Trio.
No, Redding.
Redding Trio. My mistake. But hopefully it will evolve into a quartet one of these days before the presentation will fall. Okay, well, I'm privileged to introduce our speaker, Pastor Jason Dietz. He's from the Erie area, and he's given this presentation that we're going to start with tonight all over the country. And he's well versed in what he's about to speak on, and hopefully we'll be able to take something away from this presentation tonight that will help each one of us with our daily lives. Jason is married, has what, 2 children? Two children, and of course a wife.
Well, good evening. It's good to be here with y'all. And yeah, it's just really great to be here. This presentation, I think this is like the 8th time I've presented this. So I've presented it all over the country, and it's really exciting. Every time I present it, there is lives that are transformed. And when you look at the schedule that y'all received or looked at the handbill, you'll notice that it's only 8 nights, including tonight. So you look at 8 nights for an hour a night that are absolutely going to transform your life. So you don't want to miss it. Tonight is just the beginning of our journey. And so as much as you can, make that time available throughout the rest of the week as we take this journey together through the Bible and find practical answers to the problems that we all face. Today, we're talking about problems in general. We all have problems. We all have issues. Isn't that right? Is there anyone here who doesn't have problems or doesn't have issues? If so, I need to get closer to you and maybe buy some lottery tickets. I don't know. But we all generally have problems. If we don't have any problems now, we've had them in the past and we will have them in the future. One of my biggest problems that I encountered was when I was in the Army. I was on my 3rd deployment to Iraq, and I found myself that night pulling security for the sniper element. And so what the sniper element does is they're like the ninjas, and they go from rooftop to rooftop. And it was my job that night to kind of watch their back while they were looking down their scopes and kind of providing overwatch for the rest of us. Like I said, these guys are ninjas, and I'm not a ninja. I'm a very short, kind of stocky guy. And, you know, I'm the kind of guy who walks into a room at night completely unstealth. You hear, things flying and breaking, and that's how you know that I've entered the room, right? I'm that kind of guy, tripping over stuff and all of this. And so here I am with these group of crazy guys, and I'm going from rooftop to rooftop in Iraq at night, very stealthily like. And you can hear me trailing in the back, just knocking things over and all this. Well, we get to this one part of the building, and basically they have their bathrooms outside, okay? We climbed up onto this kind of outhouse thing, and then we had to go over to the ledge of the roof, okay? And so it's about from here to there. Now, I had 90 pounds of gear on me, and it was a very precarious spot to jump onto because you had probably about a foot or less of space to put your foot to make sure that you're not going to fall. And I got up there. All the snipers, they went across, and they're jumping over, and they're shimmying across this roof 2 stories up. And I'm saying to myself already, like, this is a bad idea. This is not going to turn out well. And so I get up, I get up my nerve, and I jump across, and I land it, and I'm just kind of doing one of these things across the roof. The snipers go on top, and a guy comes out of the roof, and they're trying to detain this guy, and wanting to find out what his story is. Probably just want to know who's on his rooftop at night. But they're detaining this guy, and I'm even more pressed to get on top of this rooftop. And I go to pull myself on top. And then in Iraq, the building codes aren't quite up to the standard here in the States. And so literally I went to pull myself on top of the roof, and the entire side of the building came with me. I fell 2 stories, and I kid you not, I fell for so long that there was a point whilst I was falling that I said to myself, this is going to hurt. I used a few more expletives in there at the time, but I fell for so long. I said I should have hit the ground by now, and I still didn't hit the ground. Well, soon enough, the ground caught up to me, and I hit, and I broke both my ankles, shattered them up. It was just a bad night. It got even worse when I landed. I landed on my feet because I'm like a cat, right? I landed on my feet. I fell back, and all of that debris, all of those cinder blocks that made up that house, and all of that had one place to go, and it came falling down right by me. There was one point at which the AC unit, they had an AC wall unit, at which I saw that coming for me, and I thought at that point it was over. Like that was the end for me. And so thankfully, I fell in such a way to where all of that stuff had missed me. But my problems just kept getting worse from there. You know, the medic came over and he couldn't find a pulse in my ankles and my legs. And I don't know, I'm not a medic or a doctor, but if you don't have a pulse, it means can't get blood there, and it's not a good way. And so he couldn't get a pulse. He finally finds it, takes me off to the hospital, and I go off. I go off to Germany the next couple of days, and I go to Germany, and they do the first of 3 surgeries. And the problems, like I say, they just keep kind of getting worse. When it rains, it pours, right? And so the doc who did the surgery, I don't know if he was like crooked-eyed or cross-eyed or something, but my feet were like duck feet, like just kicked out like this. I'm walking like this. I'm like, I think he made a mistake here. Right? And so that was the first surgery. And then it got even worse when I was back down in Georgia, and they give you all of these wonderful pills, right, for pain. And me being very naive at the time didn't recognize or understand just how quickly you can get addicted to those pills. Now, I've been in the hospital for about a month now, just on morphine and Percocets and just kind of just sleeping, basically. That's sleeping and eating. That's the only thing that I basically did for that month. And I get out, they give me this big thing of pills, and before long, I like just plow through this. It's like a bucket, basically. That's the only thing I can liken it to. It's just a bucket of painkillers. And I went to town on that. And before I recognized it, I had become addicted to painkillers. And my problems just went from bad to worse. And I don't know if any of you can identify with that. Certainly the character in the Bible, David, he can identify with that. He notes here in Psalm 25, verse 17, my problems go from bad to worse. Oh, save me from them all. And tonight I want to talk about problems with you. We all have problems. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter your social economic status. No matter who you are, we all have problems. And if you don't have problems tonight, you will have them in the future, or you've had them in the past. And so tonight we're going to talk about the problems that we have. Maybe some of you can identify with the 3 problems that we're going to talk about tonight. The first problem we're going to talk about tonight is impatience. Impatience, all right? Patience is something that you want the car behind you to have that you're unwilling to give the car in front, right? I can be a very impatient person. I don't know about y'all. I can be a very impatient person, and it especially comes out when we're out to a fancy restaurant. I don't know if you guys ever go to a fancy restaurant with your families or whatnot. Well, we go out to McDonald's, a nice fancy restaurant, something like that. I'm kidding. We go, the Olive Gardens, the one where you get the appetizers and, the salad and all of this, right? So we go out to these restaurants. Now, my wife and myself, we're on the same page when it comes to eating. When the food is there, you eat it, okay? There is no talking. There is no the conversation is over. It's time to eat, all right? And, some people don't agree with that, but that's the way I operate. And I don't know if it's the Army that instilled that in me, but when the food is there, it is time to eat. Wife, she's on the same page. Food is there, it is time to eat. Apparently, though, my 2 daughters have not got that memo yet. And so my one, who is 2, is working her way up to be just like the 4-year-old, it seems. But when they sit down to eat, they take forever. Oh, my goodness, forever. It is a never-ending process. It's the meal that keeps going on and on and on. It is so bad. We sit down, the meal comes, the wife and myself, we're eating, we're done. Naomi, my oldest, my 4-year-old, she's not even taken a bite of that food yet. She's looking at it, and then she gives a nice critique of it. I tell you, she could be a real foodie, right? Oh, this looks terrible. Oh, this is disgusting. Oh, this looks delicious. And then she'll take a little bite. Ah, yes, that is good. And I tell you, if she had a cell phone, I think she'd take a picture of the food. But she just takes forever when it comes to eating. And then, it just takes so long. I do something she just absolutely loves. And that's I start to help her out with her food, because it's just too much for her, obviously, if it's taking her, more than 45 minutes. So I start to help her out, and she just loves that. I got the fork marks in my hand to prove it from her stabbing at me every time I reach over to help her out. But I'm a very impatient person, at least when it comes to those sort of things. And there are people who are impatient in life. They're asking the question and wondering when it's going to be their turn. And I don't know if you can identify with this group of people who were impatient, but the Bible talks about this group of Israelites who had a problem with impatience as well. Notice here in Numbers chapter 24, in verse 1, that should be Numbers 24, not Numbers 21, by the way. Numbers 24, in verse 1, the Bible says, "Then the people of Israel set out from Mount Or, taking the road to the Red Sea to go around to the land of Edom. But the people grew," what's that word? Impatient on the long journey. One of the worst things that you can do is take a long journey with kids. Am I right? Has anyone ever experienced? Grandparents, you know the struggle. Parents, you know the struggle. Oh my goodness. Back in the day, it was harder than it is today, because today we got a lot of entertainment and they can be entertained pretty easily. But back in the day, man, there was no entertainment. And from the moment you left, what's the first question every kid is asking? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And I think Naomi heard this presentation too many times, because she's asking it all the time. Are we there yet? We just left. Are we there yet? We just left. We can't go any faster. It's not going to. She just doesn't understand the concept. But, back in the day, we used to count mile markers, for fun. We lived in Michigan, and my family, most of my relatives, they lived over in Philly. And so we'd have 12 hours of nonstop joy and excitement, counting mile markers all along the way. But kids never fails. Are we there yet? Can I use the bathroom? I want to go. I want to get out of the car. And it's just this constant impatience. And, a lot of times we generally don't grow up in life. A lot of times we still have that kind of mentality of, are we there yet? When is life going to finally throw me a good pitch, so to speak? When are things going to go my way? When am I going to find the right one? When is fortune finally going to be in my favor? When am I going to get that promotion? When is it going to be my turn to be happy? And when are my kids going to stop being the ones who are getting in trouble? When are things going to turn around for me? And here's the interesting thing, the situation will constantly, it seems that it will never improve. And so we become very impatient. And there are a few things I want you to understand about impatience, all right? Impatience is worrying that God won't get it right, okay? Impatience is worrying that God won't get it right. And the driving force behind impatience is what? Is control. The driving force behind impatience is control. All right. One of the reasons is why we are impatient, because we kind of have this illusion that we are in control of things. We're convinced maybe that our plans are the best, that our way is the rest, and you've made plans for your life and how things should be. And, I just want to tell you tonight, I'm thankful for the times that God has deviated the plans that I had for my life. I'm thankful for the times to where things didn't go the way that I had hoped they would. And I'm thankful that, God had directed my path away from the things that I thought were best for me. And so there are times in my life that I thought it was best for me to be in one place, but God had other plans and put me in another place. And I'm thankful for that. And so looking back, I can see God's hand at work through it all. Notice here, there's not much that we can control in life. Notice here in Psalm 115, verse 3, it says, our God is in the heavens, and he does as he what? and he does as he wishes. So I want to let you know straight off the bat that God is in control. No matter what problems that you're facing, no matter what you're going through, God remains in control. And so there's not many times in life that we can control the things that happen to us. There are bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. That's just how it happens sometimes, and many times we can't control the things that happen, but we can control how we respond to those situations and to those times in our lives. And so the first thing we understand is the driving force behind impatience is control. The second thing about impatience is that you can't accelerate God's blessings, but you can what? But you can delay them. You can delay them. The Bible talks about this phrase over and over again. It talks about this phrase, at the appointed time. At the appointed time. In other words, God has blessings for you at specific times in your life. You're not going to be able to rush them. You're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to push them. Make them happen any sooner. In other words, if God has something in store for you on December 5th of 2017, that blessing is going to come on December 5th of 2017. It's not going to come any sooner, but it can be delayed. It can be delayed. And so the children of Israel had this problem with impatience. Okay? They were slaves in the land of Egypt. Now, God, by his mighty hand, delivers them out of Egypt, out of this bondage, and he wants to take them to the promised land. That's what God had told them, and that's what God had promised them. He said, listen, I got something better for you. I got a blessing in store for you. And so I'm going to take you out of this bondage, and I'm going to bring you into the promised land. And so they start walking to the promised land. Okay? Now, if they had gone in a straight line from, or taken the most direct path from Egypt to the promised land, it would have literally taken them days to complete the journey. The distance was a very short distance. In fact, the distance was so short, if you would have lined up the 1.6 million Israelites that came out of Egypt, one behind another, with just 10 steps in between each of them, by the time the first one would have reached the promised land, the last one would not have left Egypt. Okay, it was that short of a distance. And yet, as short of a distance as that was, what should have taken days, it ended up taking them how long? Does anyone know? 40 years. It takes them 40 years to go from point A to point B. And why is it that it took them so long? Because they kept going around in circles. They kept going around and around in the desert. Well, the Bible gives us a clue into why they kept going around and around and around in circles. Notice here, 1 Corinthians 10:10. It says, "And don't grumble as some of them did, and then were destroyed by the angel of death. These things happened to them as examples for us. They were written down to warn us who live at the end of the age." They were wandering in the desert because of this word right here. Grumble. Because they were grumbling. What's another word for grumbling? Complaining. If you have kids, you know all about complaining, right? Or if you, anyway. We all know about complaining, don't we? And so here are these Israelites. They're grumbling because of their impatience. Okay, they didn't like what God was doing with them, and they started to become impatient, and they started to complain. And God said, "Oh, you don't like the food I'm providing for you?" Because remember, when they were wandering in the wilderness, while they were in the desert, God provided the bread from heaven, manna. He provided bread from heaven. And the Israelites, they get tired of that. And they said, we get manna every day. Manna in the morning, manna in the evening, manna, manna, manna. We want something different. And God says, "Oh, you don't like the manna? Okay, why don't you just go ahead and take another round in the desert?" right? Before long, they started, they started complaining about their leaders. Oh, why did you have to give us Moses as our leader? They said, we don't like Moses as our leader. And God said, oh, you don't like Moses as the leader? Well, why don't you go ahead and take another round in the desert? And then they start complaining about the water. They don't like the water. Oh, this water's too bitter. Oh, you don't like the water? God says to them what? Take another round. Take another round. And so, God is basically saying, you're not ready to receive the blessings that I have for you. You're not ready to enter the promised land. You're not ready. And you have to understand that movement and progress are not the same thing. Isn't that right? Movement and progress are not the same thing. The people of Israel, they had a lot of movement, didn't they? Look at it on a map. During that 40 years, how much they traveled around. They had a lot of movement, but yet there was no progress to their end goal, which was the promised land. And so a lot of times in our lives, we're like the children of Israel. We have a lot of movement, but we don't have a lot of progress, right? If you analyze your life and you look back at the beginning of the year, you look at your life and you think, man, there's a lot of movement in my life. There's a lot of stuff I got going on. I got to answer emails, got to answer the phone calls, got to please my boss, got to please my parents, got to do this, meet the expectations of this and that, and you have a lot of movement going on. I need to take care of the house. I need to be out with my friends. You have all these things happening in your life, a lot of movement, but at the end of the year, you're still the same person. You're the same person with the same problems, right? And the same problems with your kids, the same problems with your spouse. You look back and you say, wow, nothing has changed from the beginning of the year. My health is the same. My mental state is the same. My issues are all the same. We have a lot of movement, but we have very little progress. And if that's the case for you, the first place I would check is my attitude. Your attitude is what keeps you in the desert. Now, if I had told you that I had gone to school for 15 years, you'd probably think that I'm a pretty smart guy, right? I would. I mean, not too many, well, maybe, 15 years. Yeah, or maybe 20 years. I tell you, I was going to school for 20 years, right? But I told you I ended up repeating, the first grade, 18 times, right? Progress and movement are different things, right? And so the first thing that I have to understand if I'm going to get out of the desert is I have to change my attitude. I have to change the way that I respond and the way that I act to things, respond and act. I can't say, with this impatient attitude, when is it going to be my turn? I don't like this. I don't like that. I want this. And you know what God says? He says the same thing to us that he said to the children of Israel. He said, oh, you don't like your job? Okay, go ahead, take another round. He says, oh, you don't like the situation you're in? Well, go ahead and take another round. We need to submit to God's will and to his plan for our lives. And the interesting thing is, if we could have changed, if we could have altered the situation that we find ourselves in, if we could have fixed our problems by now, we would have. I know I would have. And so, if you need help, if you need to get out of the desert, you need Jesus. You need supernatural help. Help that's not going to come from the bottom of a bottle, from the bottom of a pill bottle, from the bottle of any bottle. It comes from Jesus, and we need to submit to his plan. And so the first problem we looked at is impatience, right? And so we don't want to be an impatient person, but we want to be a person who waits. We want to be a person who waits. Why wait? Why is it important to wait? Reason number one, it's important to wait is because it is what? It is a command. Psalm 27, verse 14, it says, wait patiently on the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently on the Lord. Reason so the first reason it's commanded. The second reason is it puts God to work. Notice here in Isaiah chapter 64 in verse 4. For since the world has begun, no ear has heard, and no eye has seen a God like you, who does what? Who works for those who do what? Wait for him. And so here it is, when we wait on God, God works for us. If you're sitting in the driver's seat and God is sitting as your co-pilot, God is in the wrong seat. You need to wait on the Lord. It's important to wait. First problem we looked at is impatience. The second problem we look at tonight is insolvency. Insolvency. Does anyone know what being insolvent is? Anyone? Huh? No money. Broke. B-R-O-K-E. Broke. Right? And insolvency, at least from what I understand, is a fancy word for broke. I had to do a thesaurus to make myself sound smarter. And so, anyway, it's a fancy word for being broke. And as a country, as the people here in America, we understand what it's like to be broke in part, at least as a nation, but or in a general sense, right? A lot of people have issues with money. Not everyone, but most of us spend more than we make. Notice here Proverbs 28, verse 25. Greed causes what? Fighting. Trusting in the Lord leads to what? Prosperity. Do you want to prosper or do you want to be in conflict? Prosper or conflict? Which one? I don't know about you, but I want to prosper. I don't want to be in conflict. Right? And there are four general characteristics which lead to debt. All right? Number one, you're disorganized. The first problem that you have is you don't have a plan. You have no budget, no sense of kind of goals. You're just very disorganized, right? And somebody once said, if you don't know where you're going, you've already arrived. And isn't that true? If we don't have a goal, we're just kind of spinning our wheels. And so we're disorganized. We live from paycheck to paycheck. All right? The second reason is that happens is we're empty, right? Because of lack of an organization and lack of budgeting, our bank accounts are empty. Number three, we're in the dark regarding our finances, right? You know, the Bible talks more about finances than it does about heaven. Did you know that? Jesus spends over 2,500 texts throughout Scripture that deal with finances. So obviously, it's an important topic. And so many of us have issues with finances, and we understand that it affects everything else in our lives. In fact, 80%, a study was done, 80% of those couples who got divorced had claimed that finances played a major role or a significant role in leading to their divorce. And so as a result of the darkness or the lack of knowledge about how to properly manage our finances, we find ourselves in debt. We find ourselves in debt. We find ourselves in deep. All right? So the average credit card debt in the U.S. is $15,000 and some change. That has probably gone up, but generally around $15,000. Right? And the average number of credit cards per household is 3.5. That's like a credit card, 2 credit cards for every, well, yeah. It's a lot of credit cards, all right? And so, the good news is that even though we may find ourselves insolvent or broke, the good news is that there is hope. Amen? There is hope for us. And, you know, it's easy to get into debt, but it's harder to get out of it. But you don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss the presentation on finances coming up in one of the in the nights coming up. If you have financial issues, you're going to want to come as we delve more into depth on that topic. But you know, like I said, debt is it's really easy to get in, and it's really hard to get out. It's kind of like dieting. It's a lot easier to put on the weight, right, than it is to lose it. Can anyone agree with me on that? I mean, come on. Like I say, okay, I'm going to eat right. I'm going to eat my salads all week long, and I'm doing, I'm doing P90X and the Tybo, and I'm, just busting my butt at the gym and eating right and putting on, the plastic sweatsuit and sweating out all this water weight, right? And I step on the scale and it's like, boom, half a pound. What? And then I go off to fellowship meal, right after church. I eat a little slice of cheese like this big, and then I step back on the scale. It's like 5 pounds I gained. It's a lot easier to put on the weight than it is to lose it. I don't know about you guys, but it's easy to get into the hole. And it's easy to find ourselves in over our heads in finances. But the good news is that there is hope. And so God wants to work with you, and He wants to help you. The best thing that you could have done financially is to start 15 years ago or 10 years ago. But the second best thing to start is as soon as possible, tonight even. And so the third problem we look at is insecurity. The first problem was impatience. Second problem was insolvency. And the third problem we look at tonight is insecurity. Now, I'm not talking about the insecurity that many of us have experienced in high school or in university or, throughout our years growing up. Many of us, you get the pimple on your forehead or on your face and, you feel insecure about yourself or what have you. I'm not talking about that kind of insecurity. I'm talking about we're insecure about our spiritual status. We're insecure about our relationship with God. And there's a lot of confusion, especially in North America, about what constitutes a relationship with God. In fact, there was a survey done by a large group, and they interviewed a handful of Americans. These were some Christians, some not, just a handful of Americans. And 53% of them said that works will get you to heaven. 53% of them said that it is by living a good and moral life, you will get to heaven. They did that same survey with just Christians, and while the number was still smaller, it was still pretty high. 31% said that works would get you to heaven, and that's just Christians. 31% said that good works earn you favor before God. Relationship with God is more than just doing works, all right? It's about doing the right things for the right reasons, all right? And so salvation is a gift from God, okay? Salvation is a gift from God, and we are saved by grace alone. We're saved by grace plus faith plus nothing, all right? Acts 15, verse 11 says, we believe that we're all saved the same way, by the undeserved, what's that word? Grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's hard to understand, at least for me, to wrap my mind around how a perfect God can give somebody as broken as myself, somebody who is as sinful as myself, salvation. And a lot of times, a lot of us try to compensate and to make ourselves look better, right? And, we hide our issues and we put up this facade and we talk about our accomplishments rather than our failures. And, we act like, we have it all together. We're good Christians. But the truth is that inside, the struggles that we have, they eventually manifest themselves publicly. And we have this idea that there's something that we need to do or there's something that we can do in order to achieve God's favor. But the good news is, for anyone who's falling into that category, is that we are not saved by our performance. We are not saved by how great we are. We are saved all the same way, by the undeserved grace and favor of Jesus. The more you're in love with Jesus, the more your life will change. If you could have changed by now, like we talked about earlier, you would have changed. More effort isn't going to make a difference. You don't need to do more. You need to draw closer to Jesus. You need a deeper experience with Him. Perfectionism is this mindset that equates our identity and our value directly with our performance, directly in what we can give, directly with our accomplishment. In other words, the more we do, the more we get. And the more, the better people perform, the more people get. But here's the thing that I've discovered throughout my journey with Jesus, is that Jesus loves me just the way I am. And I'm obedient as a result of my salvation. I'm obedient as a result of what he's doing in my life. I don't do good in order to be saved. I don't do good in order to earn his favor. When he saves me, everything I do is a response to and a kind of a result of what he's done for me. We're saved by grace through faith plus nothing, period. And so, why do we need grace? Why do we need grace? Well, there's two reasons why we need grace. Number one, grace gives us unshakable peace. How many of you want to have unshakable peace in your life? Amen. I want unshakable peace. One of the worst pits that you can fall into as a Christian is wondering if you are in a right relationship with God. Wondering if you are in a saving relationship with him. Always wondering and going around, am I good enough? Am I right in his eyes? But grace gives us this unshakable peace. Romans 1:7 says, I'm writing to all of you in Rome, who are loved by God and are called to be his own holy people. May God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ give you grace and peace. Give you grace and peace. Notice the order there, right? Grace comes first, and then you have peace. And it's that kind of peace that you can't find anywhere else. That kind of peace that you're not going to find in a self-help seminar, at your local bar, wherever the case is. It's that kind of peace that only is given to us through grace, through the unmerited favor of Jesus. And so, grace gives us unshakable peace. The second thing grace does is gives us unlimited power. It gives us unlimited power. Notice here in Acts chapter 6 and verse 8, Stephen, a man full of God's what? Grace and power. He performed amazing miracles and signs among the people. He performed amazing signs among the people. And so grace gives us unlimited power, unprecedented access. When we don't understand how we're saved, it affects everything in our lives. When our Christianity is based on our works, or is based upon what I do, when we say that Jesus isn't enough, he may be a good starting point, but now I have to start working on my own. When we say that it's Jesus plus something, or mostly Jesus, but then I have to contribute, when we are dependent upon our own efforts and not allowing God to enable us to get to the end result, what ends up happening is we have a whole bunch of knowledge without power. You have a whole bunch of knowledge without power. And knowledge without power does a couple of things. It's frustrating. Knowledge without power is very frustrating. I mean, I had one friend of mine. His name was Steve. Now, Steve told me this story. I don't know if it's true. I'm assuming it's true. I don't know why you would really make it up. But he told me this one story, that when he was younger, he had these little green army men. You all remember these? Right? The little green army men, right? Now, he had these green army men, and he was playing with his other friend in his room. And his dad walked in. And his dad had this very disgruntled look on his face, as though, something, this boy, obviously, Steve, did something wrong. And so Steve, looks at his dad looks at him, and his dad says, what are you doing? And Steve looks up, I guess in his innocence, he's like, we're playing war, Dad. And his dad is just getting even that much more disgruntled, and he shuts the door, and he goes downstairs, and he comes back up with a pair of scissors. and he begins to cut all the rifles off of these little green army men. And so the father tells the boy, Steve, he says, "Listen, Steve, we don't play war in this house. We're medical missionaries." Now you have a whole bunch of medical missionaries. And he left. He walked out. And Steve was like all despondent. He's like, "Man, we were playing war." And his friend was playing war and all of that sort of thing. And just all despondent that his dad ended up doing that to him. And so he noticed, though, that there was one little green army man that his dad missed something on it. He had a .45 caliber sidearm. And so this one little green army man walked around and killed all the medical missionaries, right? Because that's the way that's what, you're going to tell me I'm a medical missionary. I'll show you, Dad. And so the one little green army man killed all the medical missionaries, at least according to him. The interesting thing, where I met Steve, anyone want to take a guess? In the army. I met him in the army, right? Because fear can change your outward behavior temporarily. Fear can change your outward behavior temporarily. And more often than not, what we try to repress, we often end up encouraging. And so we try to repress it with fear and so forth, and it works for a time, and it works temporarily, but grace changes you permanently. And when you understand grace, when you understand what Jesus did for you on the cross, you understand that you are saved by grace through faith plus nothing. And something comes over you. You don't want to do those things that once hurt the person that you love. You don't want to go around hurting Jesus after he's done so much for you. When he comes into your life and you experience Jesus in a real way, things change in your life. Things change. I remember somebody was, when I first became a Christian, they came over to my apartment, and they noticed I had this TV. It was like a 20-inch kind of TV, nothing fancy. But they noticed I had this TV there, and they said, the TV's the devil. And I was like, "Oh, is it?" They're like, no, it really is like the devil. And I was like, "Oh, this is news to me." They're like, "You got to get rid of that thing." Yeah, and they were a little radical on this. But back in the day, they used to have those bunny ears on it. He's like, "Yeah, see, that's Satan's horns right there, and then the tail coming out." I was like, "Oh, snap." I was like, I gotta get rid of this thing. So I did what a sincere person would do. I was like, I don't want this demon box in my house, and so I threw it away. I was all scared, right? They scared me. I was like, no, get this thing out of here. So I threw it in the garbage. You come over to my house today, you notice I got like a 64-inch like flat screen. It was given to me for free, by the way, but I have it because fear only changes you temporarily. And I've come to learn over time that, anything can be used for bad or for good. And so, but fear changes temporarily, but grace changes us permanently. And so we have to understand that we're saved by grace plus faith plus nothing, period. And when we understand that, it revolutionizes our lives. We become holier people. We become better people. We become happier. We have the fruit of the Spirit because God is working on the inside. It's not dependent upon me and striving and kicking against the bricks and doing more effort. It's Christ in us transforming our lives. And so when we get that backwards, we have a whole bunch of knowledge without power. And knowledge without power is frustrating, number one. Knowledge without power is dangerous, number two. Knowledge without power is dangerous because, we think that we have, we put this kind of facade on. We become kind of know-it-alls, right? We live lives and we put our issues kind of away and put up this mask. And so we go around publicly talking, a real good game, but inside we got a lot of stuff going on because we have no power to overcome the issues that we have. I don't know about you, but it's frustrating knowing what's right and knowing what to do and what not to do and still doing the wrong thing. It's frustrating. And that's what knowledge without power is. And it's dangerous, too, because we go around and we think we know it all. We think we have all the answers, but yet we have no ability to make any changes in our lives. And so, you think about it, you could look at it this way. A lot of people know that smoking cigarettes is bad, right? Is there anyone here who doesn't believe that? Okay. Generally, research has showed that, hey, if you smoke cigarettes, the chances of you getting lung cancer are increased, or chances of you getting these health things are increased. But yet, many people go around smoking cigarettes, right? They have the knowledge, but they don't have the power to overcome that addiction. And I'm not minimizing tobacco in any way, because I've known many people, my own mother included, that struggle with it. It is a serious addiction. But what happens is we have all this knowledge, but we don't have the power to do anything to overcome that problem, and it's frustrating. It's dangerous because we become know-it-alls, and then lastly, it leads. We make secondary issues primary. We make secondary issues primary, right? But when we come to the cross, all of the other issues fade away. I remember shortly after I was addicted to the painkillers, I had gone down to. I'd gotten out of the army. I had been discharged and so forth for my injuries, and I just recovered from these painkillers, and I was down in Florida, and I decided I was going to visit my parents up in Michigan, and my sister was studying the Bible with a Bible worker. It's just somebody who's a part of a local church who was going around studying the Bible with people. And I tell you, I started talking with this lady. Her name was Diana, and she just started revealing to me all of these solutions in the Bible to all of these problems, and revealed to me like Jesus. And I was just blown away, and I was so overcome. And here I was. I had just been addicted to painkillers, and I'd finally overcome that. But I was still partying. I was still drinking. I was still smoking. I was still living all that life. And yet, when I gave my life to Christ, and I allowed Him to come into me, and I surrendered my life to Him, all of those problems disappeared. Some went away right away. Some took time. But the vast majority of the problems that I faced that were just bogging me down and that I thought I could find happiness, all of those things went away. Jesus transformed me and changed my life. And here's the thing. When God's grace comes into our lives, our bad habits go away. When God's grace comes into our lives, things change. And we have to understand that God first changes our status before He changes our habits. God doesn't say, change all of these things and then come to me. He doesn't say, get your life in order and then come to me. No, He says, come to me with your problems. Come to me with your addictions. Come to me with all of the baggage that you have. Come to me with your hurts, and God takes care of you. God takes care of those problems, and He transforms your life. And He transforms us into the image of God Himself. Grace is unmerited favor, and it gives us unlimited power. God just doesn't save us from our sins. He renews us and makes us into the image of God. And so when you have religion without Jesus, it makes you one of two things, either graceless or godless. And I think at the end of the day, the legalist and the atheist, they have something in common. They both try to save themselves. One, the atheist by rejecting, and the other, the legalist, by minimizing God. What the law demands, grace provides. And I stand before you tonight as a testimony of what God can do, of what his transforming grace can do in your life. The Bible is not full of good advice. The gospel is not good advice. The gospel is good news. God doesn't come into our lives and take a bad man or a bad woman and make him better. God comes into their lives and make a dead man or a dead woman alive. And so I'm not working toward victory. I'm working from victory. And so the moment you allow Jesus to be the leader in your life, things are going to happen. Things are going to change. You're no longer, driving the car. You're no longer fighting for control of your destiny. It's Jesus who's doing the work for you. And the work that he starts, he's the one that's going to complete it. Now, there are some here tonight who are wondering, how is this? How can this happen? How is it that I can trust somebody who I don't see? How can I trust somebody who is invisible? But the reality is, you think there's a lot of things that you just can't see that are real. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, you can't see gravity, but we experience it. We're experiencing it right now, right? We can't see gravity. We can't see oxygen, can we? We can't see the oxygen in the air. We don't see that. But yet it's real. We're living and we're breathing. And to be honest, I don't think if we could see oxygen or if we could see gravity, it would make me appreciate it anymore, right? Because I experience it on a day, on a daily thing. Some of us appreciate gravity a little bit less. But whatever the case is, it's one of those things that we don't need to see it in order to appreciate it because we experience it every single day. And so we have to understand that just because we can't see it, just because we can't see God, doesn't make him any less real. Now, maybe you say tonight, well, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know my life. I've tried this and I've tried that, and it just seems to not go the way that I hoped. I always seem to fail. Well, notice here, this kind of righteousness by faith, right? And so here in Hebrews 10, verse 35, we discover this. It says, therefore, do not cast away your confidence, which has great reward, for you have need of endurance, so that afterward you have done the will of God. You may receive the promise. For yet in a little while, and he who is coming will come and will not tarry. Now the just shall live by faith. But if anyone draws back, my soul has no pleasure in him. So the just should live by what? Now, just to give you a little background, there is the people here, the Hebrew, Paul is writing to the group of Hebrews who are now Christians. Now, they find themselves in a precarious spot between a rock and a hard place. They're facing persecution from the Romans, and then they're facing persecution from the other Jewish people, right? Because they're kind of a Jewish Christian. And so they're first facing persecution on each side. And so Paul says, listen, you need to have faith. The just shall live by faith. Righteousness by faith, right? But here it is. He's talking to a group of people who are already in a saving relationship with Jesus. He's talking about righteousness by faith with a group of people who are already in a saving relationship. And so he's saying, listen, you still need to have faith, right? You still need to have faith. And so here's the thing. I need a volunteer. Does anybody want to be my volunteer? All the way in the back. All right. I'm going to walk all the way back here. Is that good, Steve? You're gonna miss it. All right. So I got a gift for you in the back. I got this sweet, sweet gift. Life without limits. All right? Now, I'm going to give you this gift. Very simple illustration. Now watch. I have a gift, and I'm going to give it to you. Beautiful illustration, right? Now notice something. I had the gift, right? Now, you had to do something in order to get that, right?
I had to reach out and take it.
You had to reach out and take it, right? Now, I could have pulled that away, right?
Yep.
And so you had some faith in me that I was actually going to give that to you.
Yep.
believe it or not, you did.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a pastor, so I can't lie or do anything wrong. So I gave it to you, right?
Yes.
You by faith reached out and grabbed that. And so here's the thing for us that we need to remember is that as we're walking, we need to remember that the victory is already ours. Jesus has already given us the victory. The problems that we have right now are not a result of lack of power on God's part or a lack of ability for him to take those things away. It's simply reaching out by faith and trusting in God to save us. Trusting in God and believing that we have the victory. And so here's the thing. What that changes in your life. When you believe by faith that you already have the victory, that Jesus has already given you the victory over your problems, what that changes is this. When I'm being tempted to do something wrong, my prayer is no longer like, Lord, here it is. Like, Lord, help me. I need victory. I need you now. But rather my prayer is, Lord, you have already given me this victory. And I'm stepping out in faith as though you have already given me this victory. And I believe that you have already overcome this problem that I face. You have already overcome this temptation. And so it changes the way that I respond in that way. And so God has given us the victory. But you know what? There are some things in life, some problems in life that we've prayed and we've prayed about, and it just doesn't seem as though God is answering. It just doesn't seem as though God is taking this problem away. And I don't know about you, but there have been struggles in my life that seem to never end. And I've prayed to God, and it's kind of, that no, you're gonna have to go through this. There was the no is the hardest. The no is the hardest. Notice here in 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul says, he prays to God about this thorn in his flesh. He's saying, man, God, I got this problem, and it's so big that I'm praying to you over and over again to take it away. And notice what God's response is. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in your weakness. So now I'm glad to boast about my weakness so that the power of Christ can work through me. There was a kid when I was growing up. He was like one of the best in our karate class, I guess you could say. And he worked tirelessly. I mean, he was putting in so many hours with the trainer, sensei, or whatever you want to call him. And he put in so much time and so much effort that he ended up being like really, really good and going on to the states and national matches and all of these sort of things. And John, he that was his name. He goes to this one match, and he sees his opponent, and he is so excited because it's the finals. And he knows that he's just going to destroy this guy because the guy is missing his left arm. And John is saying to himself, you gotta be kidding me. Like, they're going to put me up against this guy with no left arm. Come on, you gotta be kidding me. And so John was just excited. He was stoked that he was going to win the match. Hands down. How is a guy with no left arm going to beat him after all the time and all the effort that he put in? And so he gets to the mat. He gets there in the center. They shake hands or whatever. And before John knows it, he's lying on his back, and it's over. And he lost the match. And he is just in amazement and just can't believe that this kid with no left arm just beat him. And so he goes back to his trainer, he goes back to the sensei, and he says, listen, how is it that this kid with no left arm was able to beat me? How is it that I was not able to defend myself against him? And the master sensei, he looked at him, he looked at John, and he said, the only way to defend against that move is to grab the left arm. And you see his opponent's apparent weakness became his greatest strength. And likewise with us, the problems that God won't take away become our greatest strengths. We have the victory at our disposal. We have the solution to all of our problems right there. It's about reaching out in faith and taking that. And I want to invite you tonight to make that decision. We have some cards that we're going to pass out to you. And there's some decisions on there. I don't know where you are in your walk. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what problems that you're facing, but I do know that there is hope. I do know that there is solutions to your problems, and that solution is found in Jesus. We all have problems, but the good news is there's a solution and there is hope. And so whatever applies to you on that card, go ahead and fill that out. Maybe you want to accept Jesus as your Savior. Maybe you want to be baptized. Maybe you want to become a member of this church. Maybe you want more information about this topic, or would like a visit, or would like Bible studies. Whatever applies to you, just go ahead and check that box. If nothing applies to you, don't check anything. But go ahead and fill that out, because tomorrow we're going to have a drawing for a door prize. And so we use that card that you have there for the door prize. And so make sure to fill it out, put your name on it, put your address, and that way tomorrow we're draw names from a hat, and you can be entered in for that drawing. And so whatever applies to you, go ahead and make that decision. Like I said, if nothing applies, feel free to leave it blank with the exception of your name and your information there.